This lesson is going to cover solving quadratics by graphing. Our essential question is, what does it mean to solve a quadratic? So this is the first method that we teach you guys on how to solve quadratics. So this is method number 1, which is the method of solving. Now to talk about what we're solving for exactly, we're going to talk about x-intercepts. So remember, an x-intercept is the point on any function where it crosses the x-axis. Oops, I can't spell today. Point that crosses the x-axis. Now that point could be multiple points or it could just be one point, but we'll talk about that in a little bit. As a reminder, x-intercepts are also known as zeros. They're also known as a root or roots, but also the word solution. Now we're going to be seeing this word quite a bit. So solution is important to us because we will be seeing it asked for frequently. And we just have to remember that just means we're solving for x-intercepts. So if I'm asking you, hey, I need you to find the solution to this quadratic, I want you to find the x-intercept to this quadratic. Same thing with root, same thing with zero. So as a reminder, anytime we were asked to solve a quadratic, they're specifically asking us to find the solution, aka the x-intercept, or intercepts if we have more than one. All right, now when we are graphing them, we are going to see 3 types of graphs. We can see graphs where we have either 0 solutions, we could see graphs where we have 1 solution, or we could see graphs where we have 2 solutions. So what do those types of graphs look like? Well, let's go ahead and start off with 2 solutions. So if I have 2 solutions, that means that my graph or my quadratic goes through the x-axis twice. So that could maybe look something like this, a quadratic that opens upward, and I notice that there are 2 points on the graph where it goes through the x-axis, so I have 2 x-intercepts. Now, as a reminder, quadratics can also face downwards as well, so you could have quadratics that look like that and go through the x-axis twice. So that would mean that my answers should be 2 x-intercept points. So something comma 0, something comma 0. So for this x-intercept and for this x-intercept. And so again, that is a situation where we have 2 solutions. We can also have a situation where we have 1 solution. 1 solution means it only touches the x-axis once, and that only happens if our vertex is on the x-axis. So it can either open up or down, but for the sake of this example, I'll go ahead and draw it facing upwards. And here our vertex is on the x-axis, so that means that our solution would just be that singular point, and that would mean we only have 1 solution. So that would be an example of that. 0 solutions is what we call no solution. And remember, a solution is just an x-intercept. So how do I have a quadratic where I wouldn't have any x-intercepts? Well, it could open upwards, and if it's above the x-axis, and the vertex is also above the x-axis, we're not going to have any x-intercepts because that vertex point, that lowest point, is above it. Same thing if it opens downwards, the vertex would need to be below the x-axis, and it would never cross the x-axis in that situation, so you'd have no x-intercepts. So kind of a recap of what we kind of just talked about here. What do all x-intercept points look like? So when we're asked to write down a solution point, we want to make sure that we put it in the correct form. It's going to be number comma 0. So like 5 comma 0, negative 2 comma 0, so on and so forth. And sometimes those solutions are not whole numbers, and we'll also talk about that as well. Now, if we're trying to solve a quadratic, remember we're solving for the solution, right? We're solving for that x-intercept. We want that y value in all cases, no matter what. The y value in all of these x-intercepts is 0. And so we want our y value to equal 0, aka we want this y to essentially become 0. And it does not matter which side the 0 is on, but typically you want 0 on one of your sides. So again, as the key takeaway here, we want one side equal to 0. Let me go ahead and get rid of these yellow circles real quick. Okay. All right, so we're going to go ahead and start with the first problem. Now, in this first problem, we want a graph. Again, we want everything on one side. We want one side equal to 0. So the decision has to come of like, well, how do I get 0 on one side? The rule of thumb is you want to try to keep that ax squared term positive if possible. It's not a necessity, but I like to keep it positive just because it helps us transition into the next method, which is solving by factoring. So I'm going to kind of put a suggestion here. So try to keep the x squared positive. I'm going to try to keep that ax squared term positive. So what does that mean? Well, I see that this x squared is located on the left side, and I also see that it's positive. Because it's positive, I'm going to keep it on the left side, which means everything has to come to the left side. So how do I get all of my terms on the same side? Well, that 5 needs to be removed, right? So I'm going to go ahead and get rid of that negative 5 on the other side by adding 5 to it, because again, to get rid of something, we do the opposite. and I check to see if any of my terms are combinable. In this case, none of my three terms can combine with each other, so I'm just going to go ahead and write them next to each other. So x squared minus 6x plus 5 equals 0. Once we have one side equal to 0, this is kind of just a review of what we've done before. We just want to graph this. So I'm going to take the equation over here, the x squared minus 6x plus 5, and I'm going to type that into my calculator. So type into your y equals screen. So type into the y equals. And so I'm going to go ahead and show that on my calculator. I'm sorry if there's any noise because I got to move my iPad. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and go to our y equals screen at the top left corner here. We're going to type in our equation, x squared plus 6x minus 5. Let me double check that that's correct. Oh, it's minus 6x plus 5. Okay, so I was completely off. Okay, minus 6x plus 5. Minus 6x plus 5. Okay, once we're here, I'm gonna go to my tables. So again, tables written here in blue, so second graph. And I wanna scroll to where I can kind of see my values. I already noticed that I see a lot of single digits here already, so I'm gonna go ahead and find my vertex here. Remember, the vertex is a number that does not have a pair, so that case would be -4 does not have a pair, which means my vertex point is 3, -4. And again, this is all review from solving or graphing standard form equations from the other lesson, so I'm not gonna go too far in depth with this because we should know this at this point. So 3, -4 is my vertex point, and then to get my other points would be 4, -3, 5, 0. Above that would be 2, -3, and 1, 0. So I have +1, 0, 2, -3, 3, -4, 4, -3, 5, 0. Okay, go ahead and graph my quadratic, my parabola here. And again, remember the lesson today is solving for those solutions. We're trying to find the solution to our quadratic. And remember that at the end of the day, a solution is an x-intercept. So what are our solutions? Well, our solutions will be -5, 0 and 1, 0. Because those are the x-intercept points. That's where my, sorry. I don't know where, I'm sorry, I'm looking at it, I'm like going crazy. My solutions are 1, 0 and 5, 0. That's my bad. I completely boofed that one, but that's all right. All right, so we have two solutions here, and we just note those two solution points, and we move on to the next problem. Our next problem here is x squared equals 6x minus 9. Now again, we want to try to keep that x squared term positive, so I'm going to go ahead and move the 6x to the left side by subtracting it from both sides, and that minus 9, I'm going to do +9 to get rid of it. And then I check these three terms, none of them are combinable with each other, so I'm going to go ahead and just write it as x squared minus 6x plus 9 equals 0. And once I have one side equal to 0, I'm going to go ahead and just type this into my calculator, right? So we're going to type this into y equals, and we get our table from that. So my table from that is going to be 1, 4, 2, 1, 3, 0, 4, 1, and 5, 4. And again, you just type that in the calculator, you should be able to get a table from that and find your 5 points necessary. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and plot my points. Okay, now once I plot my quadratic on this problem, I notice, well, again, I'm trying to find the solutions, and solutions are x-intercepts. Well, here I only have one solution. The solution is 3, 0. And again, sometimes that happens, right? Sometimes you only have one solution, and that's just because our vertex happens to be the only x-intercept here. Did I say that right? Sometimes our vertex is the only x-intercept. Okay, on number 3, again, trying to keep that ax squared term positive, so I'm going to move that 6 to the other side by adding it to both sides. So x squared plus 4x, my goodness, what is going on? Plus 6 equals 0. All right, now once I type that into my calculator, I should be able to get a set of points from that. And so I have -4, 6, -3, 3, -2, 2, -1, 3, and 0, 6. And so going ahead and graph that. So -4, oops, +6, -3, 3, all right. Now here again, I'm looking for solutions, and those are x-intercepts. I don't see any, which means it doesn't hit the x-axis anywhere, so this solution would be no solution. We don't have any x-intercepts. All right. Now the next page is very similar, but you're gonna notice that we have an issue, and obviously we don't know what that issue is until we actually start the problem. All right, so the first thing is we're gonna find the zeros. Remember, a zero is just an x-intercept, so we're doing the exact same thing we've been doing. And remember, f of x is the same thing as y, so this is just an equation like we've normally seen. So I'm gonna go ahead and type that in the calculator. Y equals 3x squared plus 6x, 3x squared plus 6x minus 4. And I'm gonna go ahead and pull up my table for that one. And my table is looking like I have to scroll a bit. We got the points -3, 5, -2, -4, -1, -7, 0, -4, and 1, 5. And again, how to find these 5 numbers, I'm looking for my vertex, and once I find my vertex on my table, I go ahead and put the 2 points above it, the 2 points below it. So I'm gonna go ahead and graph these 5 points. So maybe here. So a couple of things that are different from the previous graphs. This one's pretty long. And the reason why it is because it's narrow. This graph is super narrow, and it is narrow because that the A value here is 3. And we talked about this during transformations, but the larger your A value, the more narrow your graph is going to be. So this graph is pretty skinny. It's pretty narrow. Now, I don't know if you've noticed the issue yet, but our goal is to find the solutions, the x-intercepts. Well, does this quadratic go through the x-axis? And the answer is yes, it does go through the x-axis. It goes through here, and it goes through here. Our issue is they are not whole numbers. And if that's the case, we're gonna have to go and use a different tool in our calculator to help us find these. So I'm gonna go ahead and write the steps on the side here. Now, anything that's in a rectangle is a button. So first thing we're gonna do is press the graph button. And then after that, we're gonna go to a feature on our calculator called calc. But to get there, we have to press the second button and then trace. So 2 buttons for that one. Once you get to this screen, it's going to give us a menu of options. And when we get to that menu, we're going to select option number 2 because that option says 0. And remember, a 0 is an x-intercept, and that's why we're pressing that option, because we want to find the x-intercept. That's what we're looking for here. After we go ahead and select that option, it's going to ask us a question on the bottom of our screen. It's going to ask us left bound ? And when we get to that screen, we're going to go ahead and type in a number. And once you type in that number, you're going to press enter. So you're basically answering the calculator. It's going to ask you a question, you tell it the answer, and you press enter to kind of lock that in. It's going to ask you a second question. The second question is just going to ask you for the right bound. Once you type in that number, you're going to go ahead and press enter. And then the last thing it's going to ask you is to guess. Now, we are not going to guess, so we're just going to bypass that. I'm just going to press enter. So, straight from guess to enter. You're not going to type anything in. So these are the instructions on what we're going to do. Now, again, I'm going to refer to these instructions as I'm working on my calculator with you. So I'm not going to be going back and forth, but just, again, have your notes out so you can see the instructions as I'm going through this process. Otherwise, it's going to be really confusing. So just make sure you have these instructions written somewhere while I'm going through this on the screen. Okay, so again, my goal is I need to figure out what this x-intercept is and what this x-intercept is, but because they are decimals, we're gonna have to use a calculator to help us. So I'm gonna go ahead, I'm gonna move my calculator here. Okay, so first thing I'm gonna do is I'm gonna press the graph button. Now the graph button is in this top right-hand corner, so I'm gonna go ahead and press that, and it's going to go ahead and graph the numbers for me. Now again, we know that there are 2 times where this graph crosses the x-axis. It crosses here and it crosses here. We're gonna have to find both, but we can only find one at a time. So I'm gonna find this one first. So the first thing we're gonna do is we wanna use this calc feature in blue. So you're gonna press second and then trace. Second trace. Once we press second trace, it's gonna ask us what do we wanna find? Well, we wanna find the x-intercept. So that's gonna be option number 2 for 0. And then you'll see at the very bottom of your screen, it's asking you a question. It's asking you left bound. So if we're trying to find this x-intercept, because this is the first one we're looking for, what number is directly to the left of that? Well, that's gonna be -3. So I'm gonna type in -3, and you'll notice it starts typing in at the bottom. Once you're done typing in your answer, or typing in your number, you're gonna press the enter button at the bottom right corner. And you'll notice that a dotted line is gonna pop up at -3. Then it's asking a question. Well, what's the right bound? Well, what number is to the right of this x-intercept? Well, the number to the right of this is -2. So I'll go ahead and type in -2 and press enter. So now I'm telling my calculator, I want you to search between -3 and -2 for that x-intercept. Now the last question it's asking you is to guess, and we're not going to guess, we're just going to press enter. When we press enter, we're going to be given the solution at the bottom here. So it's telling us the 0 is at the point -2.5275 blah blah blah, comma 0. So I'm going to go ahead and go back to my notes. So now that my calculator has found that for me, that is the point -2.53 comma 0. Oops, went around to the hundreds place there, 2 decimal places, so 0.53. Now again, we still have this x-intercept we need to find, so I'm going to go ahead and switch back to my calculator, and we need to find this x-intercept. So to find that x-intercept, I'm going to repeat the process. I'm going to press second, trace, press option 2 for 0, and now I'm looking for this one. Now because this is a new point, we got to put in new numbers. So what number is to the left of this x-intercept? Well, that would be the point 0. So I'm going to go ahead and type in a 0, and I'm going to press enter. And then it's asking me what number is to the right of that. So you see it says right here. So the number to the right will be +1. So I'll have to type in a +1, press enter. And then for guess, I'll press enter again. And then it's giving me the point x equals 0.5275, so on and so forth. So I'm going to go ahead and round that to the hundredths place. So that's going to be 0.53 comma 0. So it's not that they don't exist, they're just decimals, so they just don't show up on our table, and you know, that happens sometimes. So we're gonna practice this one more time with a brand new problem, just so you can kind of get the hang of it. So this question is asking us to find the roots. Remember, roots are just x-intercepts. And again, f of x is just the same thing as y equals. So I'm gonna go ahead and type this into my calculator, 2x squared minus 12x plus 13. I'm gonna go to my table and find those points. So it's going to be 1, 3, 2, -3, 3, -5, 4, -3, 5, 3. A lot of 3s. All right, so let me go ahead and graph these. And it's okay because it's a little bit off our graph because this entire piece of paper is grid paper, so we do have, we do have all those markings anyway, so it's not a big deal. Okay, now again, we notice here that we do have x-intercepts. They are just not whole numbers, so we're going to go ahead and find those. So we're going to find this one, and we're going to find this one. So I'm going to go back to my calculator just so I can show you this process one more time with a brand new problem. So the first thing we want to do after we are done with our table, we're just going to press the graph button just so that we have a graph visually on our screen. And that yellow circle is going to spin until it's done graphing, so it's kind of thinking right now. All right, once it's done thinking, we can go ahead and press second trace. And then we're going to press option 2, and we're going to find this x-intercept first. So this x-intercept, the number to the left of that would be +1, press enter. The number to the right of that would be +2, press enter. And I'll press enter again for guess, and I get the point 1.42 comma 0. So around to the hundredths, that would be 1.42 comma 0. All right. I'm going to go ahead and go to my second x-intercept, so second trace again, press option 2, and now we're looking at this x-intercept. Well, the number to the left of that is +4. The number to the right of that is +5. Press enter for both of those, and you'll notice that there's dashed lines between 4 and 5 because we're trying to find that specific decimal. For guess, we just press enter, and I get 4.58 comma 0. But that is how we would solve quadratics using the process of graphing. And sometimes we get whole numbers and sometimes we get decimals, but either way, the process of graphing is the same.